The night I ran away, no one stopped me, not even my father. I walked out with nothing, just the sound of my little brother crying behind the window. A year later, I came back. The house had a for sale sign. No lights, no voices, just silence, and 2 garbage bags on the porch. No call, no note, just my life, stuffed into plastic like someone had tried to erase me. But the truth is, the erasing didn't start that day. It started long before. Back when dinner meant watching Diane's son get second helpings while I scraped rice off a cracked plastic bowl. Back when I stayed up all night finishing homework with one hand and calming my autistic little brother with the other while Diane sat in front of the TV, laughing at game shows. Back when my father, who once told me stories about brave girls and bright futures, couldn't even meet my eyes anymore. From the outside, that house looked perfect. 2 stories. Trimmed lawn, white curtains fluttering behind spotless windows. But inside, it was a museum of silence, of cold shoulders and avoided glances. A place where I became invisible the moment I entered the room. People always say the deepest wounds don't bleed. They don't leave scars you can see. They just sit inside you, quiet, aching, like echoes of a home that never really was. So no, I didn't come back for closure. I didn't come back to forgive anyone. I came back because something wasn't finished. Because silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the sound that hides the truth. And if you've ever felt like the ghost in your own family, someone nobody saw, nobody fought for, then you'll understand why I had to return. I didn't expect to find anything. But then, I saw them. 2 old suitcases on the porch, covered in dust, zippers rusted, like someone had tossed the last pieces of me out with the recycling. My hands trembled as I opened them. Inside, my mother's knitted sweater, a faded photo from a beach trip we never spoke of again, and at the very bottom, a crumpled envelope, torn at the edges, stained like it had been stepped on. But my name was still there, written in shaky cursive ink, and when I opened it, my world stopped. Because what was inside was never meant to be forgotten, never meant to be thrown away. And if you're still here with me, keep listening. Because that letter, that scrap of paper they tried to bury, was the key to everything. And once you know what it said, you'll never forget it either. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Every subscription is a small act of hope for those who've been hurt and left behind, just like me. But what could have driven a girl to walk out in the middle of the night, without a bag, without a goodbye? Let's go back. To the moment it all started cracking, to the days that looked quiet but burned inside. A year ago, I lived in a house with white curtains, trimmed lawn, and a silence that wrapped around everything like plastic. My father, Richard. My stepmother, Diane, and Julian. My little brother, a sweet boy on the autism spectrum who understood more than he could ever say. From the outside, we looked like a family. But on the inside, I was just another shadow in the hallway. There, but not seen. Moving, but not heard. I woke up before dawn to make breakfast. Got Julian dressed. Took him to his therapy appointments. Held him through meltdowns while trying to finish algebra homework with my free hand. Diane barely noticed. She sat on the couch with her tea and TV remote, eyes glued to the screen, ears closed to the world. And my father, he used to tell me stories at bedtime. Now he just stared. Out the window, at nothing, at everything, at something he didn't have the courage to fix. No questions, no comfort, no defense, just me and Julian, holding on to each other like 2 kids stranded in a house that forgot how to love. There was one night, I had a fever, burning up, dizzy, but Julian was spiraling into a panic, and no one else would take him to the clinic. So I carried him, shaking, barefoot, because no one else would move. Diane didn't even look up. She just crossed her legs, sipped her tea, and said, "He needs to learn." Christmas morning, I opened my present, a fraying scarf that smelled like mothballs. Brian, her son, got a brand new gaming console. I didn't say anything, didn't flinch, just turned my head and blinked fast enough to hide the sting in my eyes. I thought of my mom, how she used to knit me red scarves, stitched our initials in tiny loops with trembling hands. Even when the cancer made her fingers ache, she never missed a stitch. She never made me feel forgotten. But in this house, every gift, every meal, Every sideways glance was a reminder that I didn't belong. Not really. And the night I rushed a friend to the ER, I came home late. The house was dark, no footsteps, no lights. Julian was curled up in a corner of his room, alone, no dinner, no one had even checked. I knelt beside him, pulled him into my arms, his body stiff with confusion and fear. And in the hallway, Diane's voice drifted from the kitchen. Cold, careless. He broke a bowl. He needs to learn there are consequences. My hands clenched, my jaw locked, and deep down, a voice inside me whispered, "This isn't discipline. It's neglect." But what she said next, that was the crack that finally split everything apart. All because he had broken a bowl. I held Julian close. His little shoulders were trembling, but it was my hands that shook. This time, not from fear, but from rage. Diane just shrugged. "Kids need to learn," she said. "Can't spoil him forever." Brian once spilled Julian's noodles, walked off without a word. Diane didn't blink, didn't move. "Your own kids get you," she muttered, "but when they're not yours, they never really do." And that was it. That was the night something inside me cracked. I crouched down to wipe the floor, quiet, burning, while Diane stood there, arms crossed, watching me like I was the maid who got hired, but never really welcome. Then she said it, casually, like it was nothing. "When it's your own kid, they get you. Other people's kids, not worth the effort." I didn't say anything, but the silence inside me started to scream. All the words I had swallowed, all the nights I had stayed quiet, the way I mothered a child who wasn't even mine while being treated like I didn't even belong in the same room. And then, like clockwork, she blamed me again. Said Julian was like that because I coddled him. Said ever since my mom died, I'd made the whole house miserable. That's when I snapped. "You're not my mother," I said, louder than I meant to, "and you never will be." She fired back, voice sharper than glass. "I don't owe you anything. I married your father, not to raise someone else's kid." And then he walked in, my father, not to ask what was wrong, not to stop the shouting, just to raise his voice and say, "Enough. You should be grateful you even have a roof over your head." Grateful? I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just turned, walked into my room, and packed the only things I owned. A hoodie, my journal, a photo of my mom, and silence. So much silence it felt like another person in the room. That night, I walked out of that house like a tree being ripped from its roots mid-storm. No plan, no money, just one name ringing in my head like the last heartbeat of something still trying to survive. Bethany. Professor Bethany, my mother's cousin. A widow who lived in a creaky house at the edge of town with 2 old cats and a kind of silence that never made you feel small. She was the only one who had ever held me after my mom died. And I didn't know if she'd take me in. But I knew, if I didn't leave that night, I might never find the strength to do it again. She was the only one who ever held me after my mother died. The only person who let me cry for hours without asking me to stop. That night, I stood on her porch, shivering from the cold and from fear. Bethany didn't ask a single question. She just opened the door and pulled me in. No words, just warmth. And in that moment, I knew I had just stepped into the beginning of something new. A full year passed. Bethany's house, with its creaky floors and 2 aging cats, became a place of quiet healing. No judgment, no slammed doors, just candlelight dinners and the kind of conversations where I didn't have to explain my pain. For the first time in years, I could breathe, sleep, think, but never forget. Because even in peace, one H never left. Julian. The memory of him clinging to me, those wide eyes behind the window, it stayed with me, like a splinter just under the skin, small, silent, but always there. Some nights, I'd dream of him crying. Other nights, I'd wake up and wonder if he still remembered me. And then, one gray morning in March, I made a decision. I had to go back. Not for closure. Not for them, just for him. I needed to know if Julian was okay. If anyone had cared. If he was still somewhere in that house, or if they'd left him behind too. When the car pulled up to my old street, my breath caught. No lights in the windows, no voices, no wind chimes, just a crooked "for sale" sign, half buried in dry leaves, leaning like someone had tried to kick it over and missed. The house was hollow. Not quiet, just empty in a way that made your bones ache. No laughter, no barking dogs, no trace that it had ever been a home. My hands were shaking when I called my father. He picked up, but his voice wasn't one I recognized anymore. I just got to the house, I whispered, but no one's here. There was a pause, then, calm, detached, like he was reading a weather report. We moved. That house isn't ours anymore. You're old enough now, Maya. Take care of yourself. Click. No goodbye. No, how are you? Just gone. And right then I realized I hadn't just been left behind, I'd been erased. Click. The call ended like a slap to the face. I just stood there, phone still in my hand, staring at the screen like maybe if I didn't blink, he'd call back. He didn't. I tried again, no answer. Once more, straight to voicemail. And then, a voice cut through the stillness behind me. Are you Maya? I turned. It was Mr. Walter, our old neighbor. Still wore the same wool cardigan, still smelled faintly of tobacco and peppermint. He stepped out slowly from behind the fence, holding 2 old suitcases. Worn handles, dust clinging to the edges. Miss Diane left these out on the porch when they moved, he said gently. I was afraid the garbage truck would take them, so I kept them in my house. Judging by what's inside, I figured they must be yours. I nodded, barely. Didn't trust my voice not to crack. I lowered to the porch steps, placed the bags in front of me, and slowly unzipped the first one. And there it was. Pieces of a life I thought had been erased. My mother's old sweater. The one she used to wrap around me during storms. A corner-bent journal, pages stained with time. A photo of me and Julian, on that trip to the lake when we still knew how to smile. I held the photo. My hands shook, but it wasn't the picture that stopped my breath. It was what lay beneath it. A crumpled envelope, torn at the corners, folded in half like trash. I almost ignored it. But then I saw the writing in the top left corner. Law Office of Marisol Hernandez. San Diego, and right there, in the center, was my mother's name. My heart slammed against my ribs. There was a date in the top right corner. Nearly a year ago. My fingers went numb. I sank to the porch. Dirt clung to my jeans, but I didn't move. I unfolded the letter. Each word blurred behind tears. No one had told me. No one had even mentioned that my mother had left anything behind. But she had. And now I knew. This wasn't just some forgotten letter. It was the first breadcrumb. A trail back to the truth my family had tried so hard to bury. And I was done letting it stay hidden. My hands were shaking. I skimmed over the frayed fabric, the yellowed pages of my old journal, until my fingers brushed against something sharp. Something thin, torn, crumpled like trash. An envelope. No one had ever mentioned it. No one had ever brought it up. I opened it and saw a name that hit me like a wave. Teresa Alvarez. My mother. My breath caught. My chest tightened, the way it used to when I was little and missed her so much I couldn't even say her name out loud. Even after all these years, just seeing it made me feel like I was 5 years old again, standing at the edge of her shadow, just wanting to be held. The letter had been sent from a law office in San Diego. The date, 10 months ago. Just a few weeks after I'd left. And that law office, it wasn't random. It belonged to Marisol, my mom's closest friend. They used to work together at a nonprofit for immigrant women. And when my mom was dying, she didn't send her last letter to her husband. She didn't trust relatives. She sent it to me, through the only person she believed would protect her final words. But I never got it. Someone else had opened it and buried it in a suitcase, like it was nothing more than clutter. I unfolded the letter. My mom's handwriting trembled across the page. If you're reading this, then I'm probably no longer here. But no matter what, please take care of your brother. Don't let him face this world alone. That was it, just a few lines. But they felt like a will, not written for a daughter, but for a mother in waiting. And still, something, why had it been mailed from so far away after she had already passed? Why didn't it mention me? My future? Anything about what she wanted for me? The questions started small, but they were growing louder, pressing into my ribs, one after another. I looked at the torn envelope again. My heart was pounding now. Something wasn't right. And somehow I knew. This letter wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Something didn't feel right. There was a quiet pressure building in my chest, like my mom had left me more than just a final wish. Like someone close had made sure I'd never find out. And I knew, if I wanted the truth, I'd have to go to the place the letter came from. I left that old house empty-handed, but I returned to Bethany's with a letter that weighed more than anything I'd ever carried. I told her everything. The for sale sign. The suitcases dumped like garbage. And the letter, with my mother's name on it, sent from some law office I'd never even heard of. Bethany listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't ask for details. Only when my voice cracked did she reach over, take my hand, and say, calm and certain, "We'll find out together. If your mother left something behind, it was meant for you. No one has the right to take that away." We didn't need more words. We packed a bag. And the next morning, we drove straight to San Diego, to the address on the envelope. The woman who opened the door introduced herself as Marisol Delgado. She was about my mother's age, her silver hair tied in a soft bun, and eyes that had clearly seen too many stories, but never lost the strength to carry them. When she saw the letter, she paused, then nodded. Slow, deliberate. "I remember this," she said. "Your mother trusted me with a few important things. She didn't trust anyone else, and I promised I'd protect everything until you were ready." She unlocked a small safe tucked behind a bookshelf, took out a sealed folder, and laid it on the table in front of me. Inside were things no one had ever told me about. A small house in Garden Grove, a savings account, and a life insurance policy. All of it in my name, not her husband's, not her relatives'. Me. My mother had left me everything. Not her husband, not a single penny to anyone else. Everything in my name. And at the very end of her will, there was one line that nearly undid me. "Maya is the only one I trust to love and care for Julian." Until the very end. My voice cracked. I looked up at Marisol, barely holding it together. "And what about my brother? Do you know where he is now?" She paused, studied me, then nodded gently. "We can find him. Residency systems track current addresses through tax and insurance records." She made the call right away, reached out to the right people, and a few days later, we had an address. Richard and Diane were living in Westwood Pines, a luxury apartment complex on the wealthiest side of the city. Not the kind of place you live in when you're struggling, but exactly the kind of place you'd move into after draining someone else's future. I stood in front of the apartment door, my hand trembling as I knocked. I didn't know what I was about to find, but I knew exactly who I was there for. Julian. The door creaked open. It wasn't Richard, it wasn't Diane, it was him. Thin, hair messy, clothes wrinkled like he hadn't had anyone look after him in days. But it was the eyes that got me. They looked lost, like a child who'd been standing in the middle of a polished world, but never once felt like he belonged. He blinked, and then ran into my arms. His small arms wrapped around my waist so tight I could barely breathe. "You're back?" His voice was barely more than air. I nodded, my eyes stinging. "I'm not leaving again." And in that moment, when he looked up at me like I was still his whole world, I knew this wasn't about reclaiming money anymore. It was about something far deeper. Justice, for him, and for me. 2 kids, once treated like afterthoughts in a home that was supposed to protect us. But I wasn't done, because what came next would uncover a kind of betrayal that left more than just scars. It left a trail, and I was ready to follow it. I opened the folder, page after page, signatures, account numbers, official stamps. The inheritance package, it had been sent right after I turned 18, mailed to the Bakersfield address still listed on file. And according to postal records, someone signed for it. But as my eyes fell on the signature, my heart stopped. It wasn't mine. Not even close. The strokes were awkward, crooked, like someone had tried to mimic me, but didn't care enough to do it well. My palms went cold. My mouth was dry. "This isn't me," I said. My voice sounded like gravel. Marisol just nodded. "That's what we thought, too." We pulled every record from storage, every withdrawal, every transfer, every signature tied to the estate, and what we found was like watching my life get rewritten without my name in it. The house in Santa Clarita? Gone. The savings account? Emptied. The life insurance policy? Cashed out. Every asset drained clean under the name Maya Rojas. But it wasn't me. No note, no warning, just a quiet, calculated erasure. The law firm confirmed it. This wasn't a clerical error, this was fraud. Forged signatures, abuse of power of attorney, inheritance theft, intentional, deliberate. I asked for everything. The delivery receipt, the handwriting samples, the bank records. Each page I flipped felt like another cut. Another lie I hadn't seen coming. My hands trembled, not from shock anymore, from clarity. A question burned in the back of my mind. Mom, if you knew what they had done, would you have forgiven them? I closed my eyes. and I could see her, gentle but fierce. The way she looked at me the night she last held my hand. And I knew the answer. She wouldn't have forgiven silence. She would have fought for me. Now it was my turn, because what they stole wasn't just money. They tried to steal the woman I was meant to become, and I was going to take her back. I wasn't just reclaiming money. I was reclaiming something deeper, something they thought I wouldn't notice when they erased me. My mother's trust, my name, my dignity, and justice for the woman they buried with silence and the girl they tried to pretend was never there. I sat in Marisol's office still, frozen. In front of me was the old delivery slip, yellowed, nearly a year old, and right there a signature, wobbly, off-center, wrong. My chest tightened. That wasn't me. I stared at it, as if doing so could force it to rewrite itself. "That's not my signature," I said, my voice cracked but clear. Marisol didn't look surprised, just sad. "We thought the same." She slid another file toward me. "The package went out right after your birthday. Someone signed for it, but it wasn't you." Her words sat heavy. But it wasn't just what was said, it was what wasn't. No call, no note, no warning. The house, the savings, the life insurance, gone. And nobody asked me, nobody even thought to. As if I didn't exist, as if I had never been part of the story to begin with. Marisol opened a new folder. She pointed to a highlighted section, the official asset transfer documents. "You see this line? If the signature wasn't yours, then none of the ID verifications that followed should have passed." She tapped the bottom of the page. "But every box is checked. Every step marked complete." We both sat there, quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that hides something rotten. Marisol leaned forward, her voice dropped. "I don't want to accuse anyone without proof, but someone looked the other way. And if that's true, this wasn't just a family betrayal. This was a system failure." I closed my eyes, not to disappear, but to breathe. Because if I was going to confront this, I'd have to be stronger than they remembered. And I would have to start where they never thought I'd look. I knew how the system worked. I'd watched it closely enough, from the sidelines, from the shadows, from the places girls like me were never meant to speak up. But now, if I didn't speak, no one would. And just a few blocks away, Richard and Diane were living their best lives, in a luxury apartment complex, off money that was never theirs. They'd quit their jobs, spent freely, laughed loudly, like nothing and no one could catch up to them. They thought I was gone, that I'd been erased permanently. But what they didn't know was that the very luxury they were drowning in was the first breadcrumb I followed. Because lies, no matter how polished, always leave a trail. And when the dust finally clears, when the layers of paint chip off, what's underneath is never pretty. So when they showed up at my door, it wasn't love, it wasn't guilt, it was fear. The kind that sweats through nice shirts and hides behind rehearsed apologies. Diane spoke first, her voice soft, eyes moist, like a woman auditioning for forgiveness. "We just wanted to keep the family together," she said. "You don't understand everything, Maya. Sometimes adults make hard choices to protect what's best for everyone." Each word felt like cotton candy hiding a nail. Behind her voice, a warning. "Don't stir things up, don't dig." She stepped closer, smiling, coating every lie in sugar. "We can start over," she said. "You take care of Julian. We'll support from afar. We've all made mistakes. You too, Maya. You need to learn how to forgive." It sounded like peace, but it was a leash. A quiet way to say, stay quiet, carry the burden for all of us again. But this time, I didn't play along. I looked her straight in the eyes, and I said, "You don't need me. You need a shield, someone to protect your lies before they become headlines. Don't twist forgiveness into a cover-up for your greed." Her face cracked, just slightly, but enough for me to see the panic underneath the performance. And then Richard stepped in, calm, measured, like a man pitching a business deal. "Look, I'm not saying we did everything right, but some things don't need to be dragged into the light. Family, we handle things behind closed doors. Isn't that better?" I felt the folder in my lap, the weight of it, truth inside it, and I breathed in once, then said, "I don't want your apology. I want justice. You shredded my mother's letter like trash. With the money, you didn't miss a single cent. You say you were protecting family? No, you were protecting yourselves." And in that moment, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't small. I wasn't scared. I was done. Their eyes searched mine, waiting for me to fold, to go back to being the girl who carried their secrets in silence. But that girl was gone, and the woman standing there, she was just getting started. Once again, Diane tried to turn compassion into obligation. She dressed silence in the costume of moral duty, but I didn't bite. I looked her in the eye, steady, unblinking, cold as the truth she kept hiding. "You don't need me," I said. "You need a shield, someone to keep things quiet so your mistakes don't come back to haunt you. Don't throw around forgiveness just to make me your cover-up." Then Richard stepped in. Calm, measured. Like he thought this was a business deal we could settle over polite words. "I'm not denying mistakes were made," he said. "But not everything needs to be dragged into the spotlight. Some things, if you dig too deep, they only hurt the family more." His voice was soft, but every syllable came weighted with a quiet threat. "Family is family," he added. "Some things we handle behind closed doors. Isn't that better?" I tightened my grip on the folder in my lap. I could feel the paper biting into my skin. Truth never stays soft for long. "I don't want your apology," I said. "I want justice. You tore up my mother's letter like trash, but her money, you didn't miss a single cent." I turned toward them both, not with anger, not even pain, just clarity, sharp, cold, unforgiving. "Don't come here preaching harmony," I said quietly, "when you were the ones who shattered it and built your comfort on the pieces." Richard lowered his head, couldn't meet my eyes, his hands clenched like fists he'd never dare use. Diane tried to keep her mask on, but her eyes, they flickered, uneasy, waiting for me to soften, to return to the role she'd always cast me in. The good daughter, the quiet one, the shield, the shame-bearer, but that girl was gone. I stood up, my voice steady, low, but sharp like a glass that just cracked clean. "I've stayed silent long enough," I said, "and today, I choose the truth. I didn't come to cry. I didn't come to beg. I came to launch the final counterstrike, in court, in the name of justice, in the name of every child who's ever been erased." I filed a civil lawsuit. At the same time, a criminal complaint was submitted to the district attorney. And just like that, I was no longer a girl with a story. I was a witness. To fraud, to forged signatures, to inheritance theft buried under layers of family titles and silence. The paper trail didn't lie. Every signature, every transfer, it all matched on paper. And then, one name surfaced. A mid-level government clerk. Friendly, well-liked. The kind of man people described as always on the community's side. But behind the smile, he had quietly pushed my inheritance through, bypassing every identity verification step. He didn't just make a mistake. He took a bribe, big enough to look the other way. When he was summoned to testify, he didn't look nervous, didn't look guilty. He clung to his image like it was armor. "The family was going through a crisis," he said smoothly. "I was just trying to help them through a tough time. Not everyone understands the pressure of keeping peace in the community." Sounded noble, almost sympathetic, but the more he spoke, the clearer it became. He hadn't chosen justice, he'd chosen convenience, a version of peace that left me erased, a harmony built on silence and betrayal. He didn't just sign off paperwork, he signed away my mother's last wish. And the court saw it, 24 months in prison, permanent dismissal from public service. I didn't cry, didn't speak. I just nodded, quietly, slowly, like maybe, somewhere beyond the courtroom walls, my mother was nodding too. Marisol's firm stood by me, the same office my mother had trusted with her last words. They charged me nothing, sent their best lawyer to court, partnered with legal aid groups to cross-check every forged signature, uncover every missing document, retrace every crooked step that had led to this betrayal. And they weren't alone. A child advocacy group joined the fight. They sat in every hearing, not to speak, but to be seen. So the court couldn't forget. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't about property. A child was waiting. My brother, Julian. Still hoping that someone out there would fight for him too. But I didn't stop there. I couldn't. I made one final request, one that mattered more than any inheritance, legal guardianship of Julian. Richard tried to frame it as a misunderstanding, like I'd blown things out of proportion, tried to spin the narrative back in their favor. Diane cried, her voice cracking like she suddenly remembered how to feel. "Just one more chance," she begged. "We made mistakes, but we're still family." And in that moment, I realized what they really feared. It wasn't losing Julian. It was losing control. But this time, I didn't just come with pain in my chest. I came with proof. Medical reports, therapy notes, screenshots, documents that told the story they never wanted anyone to hear. The court listened, reviewed every page, every silence I'd carried, every scar that never showed up on skin. And then it ruled. I was granted full legal guardianship of Julian, not Richard, not the man who stood by and watched me disappear, not Diane, not the woman who once looked me in the eyes and said, "I don't owe you anything." The court called her the architect, the mastermind. 7 years in prison, forgery, embezzlement, neglect, bribery. Richard, 4 years, for aiding, for abetting, for choosing silence over his own child. The judge said only one thing before the sentence dropped. You chose silence, and that silence caused harm that may never heal. They served their time, and when they came out, they had nothing. They moved away, to a quiet town where no one asked questions, lived on scraps and shadows, no neighbors, no legacy. I thought that would be the end. But I was wrong. One day, they showed up, at my doorstep. Diane still tried to wear dignity like a coat she'd outgrown. Tears welled in her eyes, her voice cracked. "Maya, you already have everything. You can't just abandon your own parents." And Richard, still sharp, still cold. "If I have to, I'll sue for custody. Julian's still my blood." I didn't flinch, didn't blink. No rage, no breakdown, just the quiet power of someone who had already walked through fire and come out whole. "Forgiveness," I said, "doesn't mean letting you hurt us again." This wasn't revenge, it was truth, finally allowed to speak. And that truth, it didn't need permission anymore. I didn't need them to beg, didn't need tearful apologies or carefully rehearsed remorse. What I needed was a world where my brother didn't have to flinch every time someone raised their voice, where love wasn't conditional, where silence didn't mean survival. This wasn't revenge, this was rebirth. Born from a wound, but ending in light. Julian is no longer the forgotten child. He has a guardian now, a protector, a sister who stayed, not just in legal papers, but in every small, daily act. The moment the ruling was finalized, I didn't wait. No hesitation. I walked straight to him. Wrapped my arms around the boy I once left behind, and promised him, "This time, we're building something new." With part of the inheritance my mother left, I bought us a small apartment. Sunlight pours through the windows. Bethany insisted on a round dining table so no one ever sits at the edge again. It's not a mansion. It doesn't need to be. It has laughter. It has peace. And at night, it has quiet that doesn't feel like fear. The three of us, Julian, Bethany, and me, not perfect, but whole. I take Julian to therapy. I learn his language, even the one without words. Bethany reads to him every evening. She teaches him how to bake banana bread, how to say "I'm safe" without ever using the words. And one day, I saw it. He wasn't just healing. He was blooming. And for the first time in years, I did too. He draws now. Not like a child filling in colors, but like someone who sees the world clearer than most ever will. One glance, and he can sketch everything. The slant of a lamppost, the way someone's sleeve folds at the elbow, even the way light dances across a window pane. One night, he looked at me and said, "Sis, when I get famous, I'm gonna make so much money you and Grandma Bethany won't ever have to work again." I laughed, but my eyes betrayed me, not because he promised to take care of us, but because after everything, he still knew how to love. Some weekends, we go to the cemetery. We sit beside Mom's grave. No words. No tears. Julian just pulls out a drawing, a sketch of 2 kids holding hands in front of a house that no longer exists, and he lays it at the base of her stone. We don't speak, because some memories are best honored in silence. But I knew I couldn't stop here. Raising Julian wasn't the end of the story. I wanted to build something that would outlive the pain. So from the house Mom left behind, I started a community center. We called it Mental Health First Homes. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't easy. People laughed. They said a girl with nothing but scars couldn't build something that would last. But I remembered her letter. And I remembered Julian's eyes the day I came back for him. So I folded every letter by hand, filed every form, held on, and then it opened. Not a hospital, not a shelter, but a second home. For kids like me, for kids like Julian, for anyone who'd been broken by the very people meant to protect them. The media called it the place where new lives begin. At a national conference, they handed me a mic. I stood there, hands steady, and said one sentence. This is not revenge. This is a rebirth. Julian comes to the center often now. He teaches the younger ones how to draw. But really, he teaches them how to see, how to hope, how to keep going, how to believe that even after silence, something beautiful can still grow. One of his earliest drawings, a quiet sketch of the tiny bedroom we once shared, now hangs in the heart of our community space. No nameplate, no caption, just a window into what it means to be seen again. Anyone who's ever felt forgotten will look at it and understand. I never needed the whole world to know my name. I just needed one person to rise again because of the story I refused to bury. Sometimes the people who abandon you teach you how to never abandon others. And if you've stayed with us until the very end, thank you. Thank you for walking through this journey, not just of justice, but of healing, of redefining what family really means. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? A quiet corner in California, a small town in Ohio, or maybe somewhere across the world? Let us know in the comments. Have you ever been hurt by someone in your own family? If you were Maya, would you forgive? Comment 1, I'd forgive. Comment 2, never. And if you could say one thing to someone who feels abandoned right now, what would it be? Don't forget to hit subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes just one story is enough to help someone stand back up and take their next step forward.